Hello. I'm Epic Ricky's Epic, and today I'm going to talk about The Lore, the mermaid body horror musical that you didn't know you needed. Part 1, The Lady Bits. The Lore, a Polish language horror movie, is the 2015 debut of
scriptwriter and also the composers.
as to avoid being culturally insensitive. The elements of this film sound unreal. Man-eating mermaids, a banging soundtrack, bloody sex scenes, and everyone dying at least once, almost? Yeah, that sentence makes sense. I'm committing to that sentence. I first saw this movie at the end of July 2018 and was instantly enamored. It's taken me a while to actually write this, but finally I can give you, hopefully, a fresh perspective on a movie that you will find Vice article and proto-Vice article on top of proto-Vice article about. Silver and Golden, our main protagonists, are two young mermaids. Golden is the younger sister with long black hair, and Silver is the older sister with long blonde hair. They take a pit into Warsaw on their way to America during the Cold War era. They trick a band to allow them to stay in their home and eventually get a gig through kind of creepy, unsettling, pedophilic circumstances at the club that the band works at to sing and strip. Mainly to show off their long, beautiful tails, which, hot take, no one really freaks out about. My questioning of the canon of this movie is completely unrelated to the rest of this review. Moving on. This movie follows the Little Mermaid folklore. You can imagine the very grim, with 2M direction that this movie decides to go down. A horror musical? Am I serious? Yeah. No, yeah, I'm dead serious. And we're not talking Sweeney Todd. Most people connotate musicals with like happy, poppy dance numbers that can be burst out into at any moment. While this movie does nod to its roots a little bit, most of the songs, if not all of them really, take place in an in-world moment of plot. Real-world punk sister duo Barbara and Zuzanna Wronska composed the songs. Each melody serves as a turning point as the sisters grow to learn their new world and as their relationship develops and crumbles simultaneously. By the time the music cuts, the image of a mermaid ripping a man's throat out with her teeth doesn't really surprise you all that much. And if anything, kinda comes as a really refreshing, sweet revenge. Most important feature of the film isn't its relation to musicals. In fact, it's the opposite. The film is a concise, well-directed movie that does its best and succeeds to avoid any of the trappings of the genre. Hey Alexa, set an alarm for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, starting now.
Hey Alexa, screw Jeff Bezos.
I don't know that.
One day, Jeff. One day. But on to the part that I'm guessing most of you came for. Body horror. So, mermaids and body horror. In terms of folklore, I'd say the two are pretty hand in hand. The Daily Beast described the lore as if the whimsical fantasy of Jean-Pierre Jeunet had been filtered through the body horror of David Cronenberg. I couldn't have put it better myself. The last place that most of us would expect to find body horror is in a musical about mermaids. There's been nods to mermaids like Joss Whedon's 2-second shot of a merman in the Cabin in the Woods. But I'm gonna not count that, if that's cool. These mermaids are a bit more traditional. They sing, they seduce, and they kill. The mermaids' tales are surreal versions of the glittering classic Disney version we all have come to know and love. They resemble giant eel tails that have been barely touched by the sun. And these mermaids can change their beautiful, glistening, perfect braces teeth to terrifying large spikes at a moment's notice. But there are two body horror scenes I'd like to point out that really make the heart of the story. The first follows Golden, the youngest of the two, and keep in mind they look maybe 16 and 17. A man comes onto her, and you see this change in her eye. a weird mermaid noise, and she decides to seduce him. He takes her into his car. If you want to follow along with the soundtrack, we are at the point, I don't believe the soundtrack's in order as sold. I'm not sure on that, and I am already too deep into literally recording this video to think to actually do that. But anyway, listen to Biting the German to Death. Sounds of moaning in this car and steam turns gradually into these screams of guttural and divine terror, which then bleed into a silence. Golden falls out of the car, her tail fully out, and begins to slowly army crawl, one arm at a time, towards the edge of the lagoon the car is parked at. In her mouth is the warm, still beating, dripping heart of the German man left behind in the car. Second is Silver's scene. So Silver is going to be a foot-in for The Little Mermaid, and her story will follow that allegory, I guess. They take an allegorical approach. She gives up her mermaid bottom half for a human bottom half, as we all know. And she does this for the very questionable human prince who is part of the band that they initially tricked into letting them stay in their home. So, with the help of this questionable human prince, she chops off the lower half of her body, and we see it. We see it, and we see human legs taken from a half-dead victim, switched, and sewed on layer by layer. Again, with the question of the canon of this movie, who is this girl that just gave her mermaid legs? Is she a mermaid now? Because she's especially, like, particularly pretty. I would say she's, like, classic mermaid material. Is this, like, magically together? How does it, hello? This is gonna kind of seem like a harsh jump, but go with me on this one. Moving on from body horror, what does it mean? What does this Polish mermaid body horror musical mean? My first instinct is to say nothing. Nothing at all. But that's not an option for this movie. The lure doesn't pretend to have a heavy-handed or pretentious meaning. Instead, it's really sincere, and it knows exactly what it wants to say, whether you pick up on it or not, and it's still going to be entertaining. Or at least interesting. A conversation starter. The music of this film is performed as something of an inner monologue for the two girls. Well, mermaids. Falls into either early 80s disco, punk rock, or some sort of electro-techno. The music also reflects how these young girls are being exploited. Criterion, the legendary film restorers, wrote an essay on this. In it, they point out how all of them, your first kiss, your first heartbreak, your first job, your whatever, tends to have musical associations, particularly when you are young. The film is no different, and I would say its explicit acknowledging of this is really what sets it apart from the rest. The rest of the Polish mermaid body horror musicals. Keeping that in mind, you can watch this movie specifically as an immigrant coming-of-age story. Back to those body horror scenes that I just talked about. Silver, who is basically the Little Mermaid allegory, loses her voice the moment the blade hits her hip to cut off her mermaid tail. The whirring of the saw in the machine replaces the sound of her voice. She is now fully an acceptable human being. She gave up what made her part of her home to fit in. Back to the first scene that I had talked about Golden, with the warm heart dripping from her spiked jaws. She is a wildling who insists on embracing her natural body, and she isn't shy to let people know where she comes from, and she is very comfortable with where she is. She uses her foreign appeal to allure those in that see her as an object. She embraces her mermaid ways despite what these humans, who she's only there for a temporary amount of time, or so she thinks, tells her to do. Which brings me to the part that this movie is also about girls becoming women, and how that process is seen as really disgusting. Silver, who is fresh from her new leg surgery, is, doing mild physical therapy, and her questionable prince man walks in, and they bang about it for the first time with an actual vagina. The moment that blood seeps from her still healing abdomen and onto his shirt is the moment their relationship ends. The tone changes, and Silver displayed a bodily function that inconvenienced him and is seen as gross and disgusting and shouldn't be seen. Rather quite the interesting metaphor for the red tide. Okay, this supposed to have a serious tone for this part, and here I am making dumb puns. That was a good one, though. I'm gonna stand by that pun, because it was layered period joke and mermaid joke. Good job, me. Pat myself on the back. And to Golden, well, people are always hitting on her, even though she looks 16 at the most. Only when these grown people who are men start to have sex with Golden does she rip out their hearts or throats or whatever. There is one fabulous exception to this rule, but you will only have to go watch the movie to find out exactly what I mean. Listen to the song, I believe it's just called Policewoman. But to this end, Golden becomes an outsider to the point of isolation because she is herself and is defending herself. Again, sound familiar? This story is a ridiculous mermaid punk Polish language musical genre mashup, but that's the point. There's already 100 movies out there about puberty, the Cold War, and immigration. Some really great ones too, like if you haven't seen Children of Men, what are you doing? The Children of Men! Anyway, this one it embraces the absurdity of it all. It embraces camp. If you don't know what that is, the Met Gala is happening probably the day I post this, and Susan Sontag's notes on camp will hopefully blow up and you'll know what I mean. Notice my strategy with posting this? Once you embrace the absurdity of the film as well, you'll realize underneath there's a movie that takes itself just seriously enough to tell you one damn good story. Long story short, this movie is for those who genuinely are rejected or otherwise are told to change their bodies in order to be accepted by the in group. Because we live in a society. But it's for the queer, it's for the immigrant, it is for the girl going through puberty, it is for the woman who just doesn't want to shave her legs. It is for the physically outcasted, because the bodies they are born in are outcasted. That is who this movie is for. It's your new favorite movie because, especially if you've managed to find this video, it's probably about you. And I don't mean the you that likes sexy ladies or the heavily, male gaze, bloody movies, but the you that can find themselves in a mermaid in the middle of the Cold War being exploited to strip and not knowing what to do. Oh, Alexa, stop alarm. You're Silver wanting a new body. And you're her first love. And you're Golden when she's having a breakdown in the bathtub over her sister, her circumstances, and her newfound status as kind of a helpless refugee. The lure will lure you in, with its enchanting soundtrack, its take on this fairy tale musical, and its love for the dark and the outside and the different. Also, if you like The Little Mermaid, and if you just want to see some, some badass ladies rip the throats out of men around them. I'm not. Literally. Thanks for watching. If you want a copy of The Lure for yourself, check out Gorehound's Playground. It's a local to Fort Collins horror and sci-fi and general sick movie store. They will have The Lure for you. I know because that's where I first watched it, in their back theater by myself, crocheting ironically a Cthulhu head purse. This Cthulhu head purse, to be exact. I'm very proud of her. And they have it in Blu-ray. I would highly recommend getting your hands on the Criterion version. And I will catch you on the flip side. I'm not gonna do the wink. We're done now.